This is the second video in Module 2 called Data-Driven Teaching Strategies. In this lesson, we will be focusing on formative assessment and how important it is that we use this teaching strategy in a blended learning environment. Formative assessment refers to the variety of methods that teachers use to evaluate student comprehension, learning needs, and their academic progress during a lesson, unit, or course. This quote from Grant Wiggins explains perfectly the reason why educators should be formatively assessing their students. Let's read it together. The more you teach without finding out who understands the concepts and who doesn't, the greater the likelihood that only already proficient students will succeed. Like he said, if we're not assessing and we don't know where our kids are at or what they do and don't know, then it's going to be impossible to know what we need to still teach them. Therefore, just those students who already knew the content will continue to know it. Formative assessment should be frequent. It happens all the time throughout the instructional day. It should be ongoing. Although we may check in on students at the beginning, that is not an end-all collection of their understanding. We continually confer or re-administer an assessment to check on their ongoing progress. It should be embedded in the lesson. Naturally, it happens, and it's not something we always stop everything for to assess. We will talk about the different times during a lesson we can embed this here in just a minute. It's informal. It does not always have to be something that takes us a long time to create ahead of time and can be on the spot. It's informative and data-driven. It's important that it is tied to our learning outcomes so that we can plan our next instructional steps and have concrete data to do so. It's a tool for teachers and students. Yes, it's a tool for us to plan our instruction, but it is also a tool for students to use to reflect on and make a plan and set a goal so they can grow on their own. So when can it occur? Formative assessment can take place before the lesson to assess prior knowledge. We need to know what students already know about the content or skill. Not all students have equal background knowledge and or experiences. It is important that we know where each student is at within the content to design instruction based on their individual needs. It can occur during the lesson to check for understanding. This shows us how well students are understanding the instruction we are delivering. This data should be used to plan next steps for instruction. It can also occur after the lesson to reflect on learning. We also assess after the lesson to give students the opportunity to reflect on their learning, deepen their understanding, and to provide time to ask questions that they still might have. Let's take a deeper look at the first one, assessing prior knowledge. Here are some sample questions you can ask students to assess their prior knowledge. Think about questions like, what do you think you know about this topic, concept, subject, or problem? Where did you learn this information from? Or even maybe, what questions do you have about this topic, concept, subject, or problem? Why should we assess prior knowledge? We should always assess because it identifies those gaps in instruction and lets us see what some of those student misconceptions are. It helps us to see diversity and experiences of students in the classroom. Not everyone comes from the same background, socioeconomic status level, or sometimes even get just provided the same opportunities. So it's important that we assess the prior knowledge to see where each of them are at. It can also, though, create a bridge between students' prior knowledge and the new content. If we can see what they already know, it helps us to help them connect to that new content. Also, to design learning experiences that meet them where they are at. Remember, every child's needs are different, and it's important we assess every single student to be able to meet them. Here are some examples of ways you can assess students' prior knowledge. I have also included digital platform ideas to facilitate it. This can be done physically in a blended learning environment as well as virtually if you're learning remotely. Think about things like concept maps and sketchnoting. You could use tools like Jamboard, the paper app on iOS, Google Drawings, and Popplet. Online discussions. We can use Google Meet, back channel chat, or even Parlay Ideas. Those old KWL charts, those are still very relevant. We could use Google Drawings to facilitate this, Jamboard, or even Padlet for that as well. Carousel brainstorming. We could use Google Drawings, Popplet, or Jamboard as a digital tool. Word association is very popular to create word clouds. A tried and true tool I really like is Mentimeter that naturally creates this for you. We can also do turn and talks virtually. We could use Google Meet breakouts, Jamboard, Google Workspace apps to be able to collaborate and turn and talk on that. Or even brain dumping. That's another great strategy to be able to support students. You could do brain dumps within any of the Google Workspace apps, Popplet, Padlet, or Jamboard. Let's look at checking for understanding. Here are some sample questions you might ask students when you're trying to check for their understanding. What is the answer to? How did you solve this problem? What is this similar to? What do you think about? How would you correct this problem? How would you explain this to another student? Or what are you struggling with or have questions about? Those can all help you to see where they are at currently during the lesson to know how to plan those instructional steps next. Why would we even want to check for understanding during the lesson? It helps us teachers to make instructional decisions to meet those individual student needs. What are some examples of digital tools for support? You might, to be able to check for understanding during a lesson, do a quick poll. You might use digital tools like Mentimeter or Poll Everywhere. The next is giving a quiz with a Google form, then using that data and sheets to really analyze it. You might do a fun review game using platforms like Kahoot, Socrative, Gimkit, etc. There are many different types of review game tools out there. You might have students do short written responses. You could use platforms like Blogger, KidBlog, or even Seesaw has a built-in blogging feature. You might ask students to upload photos of their actual work. This can be done in Google Classroom, Padlet, Seesaw, and many other different digital tools. You might have them create a video so that you can see and hear them explain their thinking. You could do this in Flipgrid or even Seesaw as well. You might have group discussions to really help to see and understand where their students are at. You might facilitate this in a Google Meet, in Google Classroom, or even other digital tools for facilitating discussions like Parlay Ideas. What about the end of the lesson, letting students have that opportunity for reflecting on their learning? Here are some example questions you might ask them at the end. What concept or skill did you learn? What is unclear or confusing? Does the information you learned today remind you of something you have learned in the past? If you were going to teach this to someone else, how would you teach it? What concepts or skills would you like to spend more time discussing, practicing, or working on? Why would we give students that opportunity at the end of the lesson to reflect on their learning? The main goal here is to empower them as learners, put that responsibility on them. It helps to build those skills for students to think critically and apply when problem solving and learning on their own. What are some examples of how to support students with that end of the lesson reflection? You could have them create a visual like sketchnoting. This can be done in Jamboard, the paper app, or different Adobe Suite applications. You can have them complete an exit ticket. This can be done in Google Forms, Socrative, Plickers, Flipgrid, or even GoFormative. You could have them demonstrate, meaning in real time show what they know. There are great tools such as ClassKick, Explain Everything, Flipgrid, or even Screencastify to facilitate this. You might have them do a learning blog to explain their thinking. You could use digital blogs like Blogger, KidBlog, or even Seesaw's blogging feature. You could have them journal. Now, this can be done virtually through like Seesaw or creating just a digital notebook and slides. And last but not least, a high-low check, kind of like that temperature check. Where are you at? You can use tools like Mentimeter, Pear Deck, or even Poll Everywhere. Just a reminder, a quote from Fisher, Fry, and Hattie from the Distance Learning Playbook. Remember, assessment is assessment. Any assessment can be used formatively or summatively. In other words, there's nothing magical in the tool itself. It's what you do with it or don't do with the teaching practices. Just wanted to remind you, yes, we can assess all day long and use all these great new tools digitally. But if we don't actually do anything with the data to make our instructional decisions and next steps, then that's just a waste of our time. So just make sure you're being very intentional when you are assessing your students. Thank you for watching Lesson 2 of Module 2 called Data Driven Teaching Strategies.